Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to WCWF. It is the Thursday show, but we have a very special collaborative post WrestleMania weekend, big time AEW show. A lot to talk about. I am joined, as always, by the amazing the Collector. EJ, welcome to the show.
I'm here. I am present. I am accounted for. I'm accountable. Great to see you guys. Great to see everyone out there. Hope you've had a good week. Hope you enjoyed this enormous weekend we just had. We're going to talk all about it. Collector's Choice, real quick. It's been a few weeks. Because I'm a collecting degenerate, I've picked up so many things. Real quick, Ringside Collectibles comes through as always. Had to complete my unmatched collection. I now have all the unmatched figures. All 5 lines, all 5 waves of 6 figures that have been released. And wave 6 is shipping out now. But from wave 1, the Darby Allin, and they sent me a 1 of 5,000. So I got a rare. It makes my 5th Chase exclusive rare they've sent me. You know, you don't order those. They just randomly put them in orders. And I've gotten a couple of 1 of 5,000s. I got a couple of 1 of 3,000. So big thanks to them, Darby Allin. Also, I picked up a what's it called? A hanger, not a hanger box. Where the cards come in now? Hanger boxes.
Yeah, the hanger box.
Yeah, hanger box of the 2022 AEW trading cards, because why not? They're for sale. And there are inserts and there are rares in those. The 2 highlights, I did get a Eddie Kingston. It's a red border, which is a rare. And that number that's right there is actually number 95 of 100. So
Very
not bad.
nice.
Number card. But even better than that, this was 1 of 50. And actually, it's a Christian Cage. It's got a piece of his ring used gear.
I like it.
Right there.
Is it a piece of his turtleneck?
It's black. Could be his turtleneck. Could be his t-shirt. Could be his tights. More importantly, it's out of 50. It is, you can even see it. It is number 1 of 50.
Very nice.
0-1. So that has to increase the value from $2 to, I think, probably $3. You know, as my brother who does a lot of the eBay stuff says, hey, the best thing to do if you want to sell this, somehow get in contact with like Christian Cage's family. Maybe he wants the 1 of 50. Short of that, it's whatever someone would pay for it. But that's Collector's Choice. Lots of cool stuff I'm getting. Great to see you guys. Huge weekend. Let's get into it.
I like it. I love cards. I've gotten back into cards since my son last year really turned me back on to baseball cards. So I've been really heavily into cards, and I'm excited about your cards there, Elliot. That's pretty exciting. As always, you can see by the caption, Vince always wins. We are joined on a special Thursday by TG. TG, what is good, my man?
A lot of wrestling to talk about. I don't have any figures or cards or sons, but I'm definitely ready to talk wrestling.
There's definitely a cause and effect. Did you collect as a kid? Did you collect baseball cards? I mean, you probably did, right?
A little bit. I definitely wasn't super into it. I think like everybody who grew up when we did, I had like a 1-year subscription to Beckett's Baseball Card Monthly from like 1989 through 1990. And then it was kind of like, okay, moving on.
December 1986, Dwight Gooden on the cover, the first Beckett card magazine I ever received.
There you go.
I definitely didn't get that.
The junk card era in the 90s. All those cards are worthless. Congratulations, guys.
Yeah, we all got into it around the time when people were like, oh, this is going to be a great investment.
Yeah, this is just awful.
Yep.
So there is a lot to talk about. There was WrestleMania. We got to talk about our picks and what happened there. We got to recap the whole WrestleMania weekend as best we can. A very huge, and I think very significant NXT Stand and Deliver, like a huge one.
Yeah.
We got to talk about AEW Dynamite in Long Island. We have not been together to talk about 2 episodes of AEW All Access, if you're watching that show.
Mm-hmm.
But all of that to talk about. Let's start what I think is the biggest news in wrestling. It actually has absolutely nothing to do with what happened in the ring. That is the quote-unquote sale, business development merger, what is of WWE. It has been I guess technically it has been sold. They kind of build it as a merger with the parent company that is the parent company of the UFC. So now the headlines were WWE UFC merged to create this multi-billion-dollar company that will be headed by Ari Emanuel of all people and Vince McMahon. Vince McMahon will now, as Tom says, Vince always wins. Vince has announced that Triple H will remain head of creative. I think we've already seen some of the questions about that. Triple H comes out and says, "Hey, I'm still in charge here." There's so much to go on, and the name of the company, I want to say it's Endeavor. Yeah, I was going to say escapes me, and I apologize for that. But let's just get. This has been months, years in the making of talk. We heard all kinds of things about where WWE would possibly go. This seems to be it. It is a merger with Endeavor. It is multi billions of dollars, but it also brings WWE and UFC under the same umbrella. Tom, let's start with you because I know you were kind of locked in with a lot of the business development to this. Were you surprised? What does this mean? Do you think it's good or bad for the WWE?
I think I was surprised only from the standpoint that, as we talked about, I thought that the most likely landing spot would have been a company that had a first-party broadcast arm. So a company like NBC Universal, which of course owns Peacock, etc., or even Fox, something like that. That's why, like, when all the Saudi Arabia talk started, I was like, this makes no sense. Like, they have unlimited capital, but I mean, just look at the Live Golf Tour. There's just no way that they're going to be able to have a product that will resemble what we have now. This deal makes a lot of sense. They basically, in terms of continuity, I think that this is going to be a really, really good fit because Endeavor is going to be in the same position that WWE as a standalone would have been in, negotiating rights deals, etc. So they not only stand to benefit greatly from the rights deals that are about to be negotiated, but also it is essentially a seamless transition. So now, instead of talking to, just WWE leadership, you're talking to Endeavor leadership, which includes some WWE personnel. I think it makes total sense from a branding and marketing standpoint. UFC under the umbrella of Endeavor has done a tremendous job with their ability to merchandise themselves, expand their footprint digitally and beyond. And I think that with WWE, which already is very strong in all of those areas, it's only stands to get stronger. I think the one thing that is going to be, well, of course, the creative question we'll put table for a second. That's sort of a separate thing. But I think from a business standpoint, the one thing that is going to be interesting to see, and I'm not sure about, is to what extent there will be any kind of synergy or crossover promotion between UFC and WWE. I think from the WWE standpoint, they're all for it. They're like, oh, this is great. We can, have Conor McGregor come on do whatever. Maybe he becomes a WWE guy, that kind of thing. I think on the UFC side, there may be a little bit more hesitancy because I think that although some of those athletes are WWE fans, actually having some kind of crossover promotion may be, for some of them, a bridge too far because they're like, look, we enjoy WWE's entertainment, but we don't want there to be confusion among fans that these things are equivalent, because they're not. So that could be a little bit of a sticking point, but of course, those decisions will be made at the highest levels and not by the individual athletes. So it's good news, I think, for from a financial standpoint for WWE for sure.
Interesting. EJ, what was your first reaction, thoughts when you heard the news that this was kind of the deal?
While we had been talking about this sale, Vince, as much as talking, he came back in order to help facilitate the sale. That's at least what he said. So we knew this was going to happen.
Always wins. Vince always wins.
Always wins.
But the actual announcement, did that come like between Saturday and Sunday, between Friday and Saturday? Yeah.
They were asking about it during the WrestleMania Night 2 press conference, and they were basically like, we can't comment. And then the next morning was when the story was confirmed.
And I don't believe they were asking about it after the Night 1. So, I mean, it was strategically timed. It was strategically timed.
Yep.
And, you know, I'll say first, I'm glad the Saudi investment fund did not buy this company, you know, for the business reasons Tom mentions, but just for sort of moral and ethical reasons. I'm kind of glad it didn't happen. You know, my first preference would have been NBC Universal, with Fox being a close second for those reasons Tom mentioned. Seamless television rights. Endeavor's just fine. I mean, Tom explained it exactly. They'll have no problem negotiating. But when I was surprised to read that basically a deal had been reached on Saturday, it didn't hit me till a little bit later, like, well, if you're now I know how the outcome's going to go, even though I sort of didn't. I sort of realized almost like in real-time hindsight, this is the product that they're selling. They're selling the product of Roman Reigns leading this entertainment company. It wasn't going to be Cody Rhodes, you know, that they're going to try to sell to somebody. This is what it was going to be all along. And to an extent, this package they were selling was Bianca Belair as champion, Roman Reigns as champion. You know, when you thought about it a little bit deeper, some of those great creative decisions we thought they were going to pull the trigger on, even the Sami Zayn, was not going to happen if they were truly that close. I'd be curious to get from Tom, like, if they were announcing basically it was done Saturday morning after, or Sunday morning after Night 1, Night 2. At what point, I'm curious, and Tom will answer this when I'm done, is like, when were other parties notified? Yeah, it's not happening. Like, when do you think the quote unquote virtual handshake was done? Was it done as much as like a week and a half ago where they had this much time? Or do you think they didn't reach it till like Thursday? Because I sort of feel like they had known this was part of the presentation of WrestleMania, was to also announce this. Either way, Tom answered that, but all my concerns about this sale are about creative and Vince, to be honest.
So to answer your question, I think for a deal like this, especially a deal where this much money is involved, because remember, WWE's market cap, which is the theoretical total value of all the outstanding shares of a publicly traded company, was in the $6 billion range, and the valuation that they were given by Endeavor in this deal is over $9 billion. So for that much money to be changing hands, this is a deal that probably has been. So let me just say this: I think in hindsight, I think the whole Saudi thing was a red herring that was probably put out there by, if not by Vince, by people around him, because the idea being, even though short term it's like people freak out, 3 months later, 4 months later, whatever it was, when the deal is finalized, people are saying, even people who are anti-Vince are like, well, at least it wasn't the Saudis. Like, this is not
literally just said that. Yeah.
Right. Like, this is not good. I don't like Vince. This is these people talking, but thank God it's not the Saudi fund. Okay. So I think that's where that came from. My suspicion is that they were already probably at least in the early stages of this deal back when that news came out.
Okay.
And I would say that in terms of finalization or finalizing the deal, I would say it was probably agreed to in principle. I would say at least a couple of weeks before WrestleMania. I mean, for them to be able to pivot around and have like this news, like, because so many, like, just so I am in comms, and just from a communication standpoint, forget about the business aspect of it. The amount of people who have to sign off on everything that is going to be part of the rollout of the communications aspect of like announcing the deal, you know, Vince and Emmanuel going on TV, like all that stuff, like that takes weeks to prepare by itself. So the deal probably was in place weeks beforehand to allow for all this other stuff to unfold in the weeks that lead up right to WrestleMania. Because you think about how busy would they, forget about the deal, like in a normal year, how busy would they all be right around WrestleMania? So all that regular stuff is already happening, to taking up bandwidth. And on top of that, they have to plan for this. So certainly that wouldn't be the kind of thing that they could roll out in 72 hours the same
Sure.
weekend that WrestleMania is happening. So I think it's been probably several weeks prior to WrestleMania.
Cheats, I'm going to guess your thoughts about it were probably some mix between me and TG's.
No, I mean I couldn't agree with TG more in regards to the timing. So most people know this, but if you didn't, I have actually worked in environments where they have announced for the state at the state level where they announced huge economic development deals or mergers, and we've been behind closed doors where they would hand out folders and briefings and so forth and swear us to blood oath secrecy because none of this stuff could get out before government official A, the governor of Virginia, the senator, whatever, had to make announcement of this many jobs. So I'm 100% with TG in the sense that this is not something that could happen on Thursday and then they be this prepared on Sunday and Monday. This is something that was weeks, months in regards to, I'm talking about probably up to a year in regards to principal conversations and all that stuff. But when they're talking about like the actual rollout plan, who announces it, how it drops, dropping on WrestleMania weekend in itself should have been a red flag that this is exactly what they wanted to do. This is how they wanted to do it. And in turn, I think there's a little bit of for the people that are going to care about this bit of information, this big business part of this, they're not the same people that are going to care about what wrestling fans care about in creative. So by dropping it on the, after WrestleMania night 2 before Monday Night Raw is the perfect time for both contingencies, if you will, because the wrestling fans are going to care about what happened at WrestleMania. How are they going to go into Raw after Mania? What's going to be the new kind of creative thing? And the people that care about the business, they're going to talk about, the stuff that we're talking about right now.
The whole thing worked like gangbusters.
And it's a perfect way to, if you want to kind of have a bury the lead type of thing, this is not getting talked about as much as it would have been getting talked about if they put it, I think, any other time of the year. So I thought it was really genius in that sense. What is my overall feeling about them being under the same umbrella as UFC? I agree with Tom in the sense that I think it's a much bigger challenge for UFC and UFC fans.
Yeah.
Because in the same way that it would have been a bigger challenge with anything that is considered a non-scripted sport. So UFC wants everyone to know that what they're doing is real. It's not scripted. It is gladiators battling at the height, and we don't know the outcome. It is boxing. It is, football in a sense, and so forth. The closer we get to Ronda Rousey being a WWE star and Brock Lesnar being this crossover, the lines get blurred, and what is actually real, right? And quote unquote, air quotes, real versus what is kind of, the worst thing that could happen to a UFC audience is something big crossover WWE happening, and then the UFC audience questioning the authenticity of like what's happening, right? Or even the legitimacy of these like amazing UFC competitors. And so there is no doubt in my mind that Vince, Triple H, they're going to want all the Conor McGregors, all the Khabibs, all of the Ronda Rouseys, all of the Francis Ngannou. They're going to want all of these people to be on WWE TV. They're going to be at WrestleMania. They're going to do all, but why do they want that? Because they legitimize the realness, if you will, of WWE. It's a fascinating situation. I'm really also interested in seeing, and I'm sure we'll all get to this, because the one thing we heard throughout WrestleMania weekend in regards to the creative part of this is frantic rewrites, people getting benched at the last minute, all of these crazy last minute decisions, Shane O'Mac coming back. We're hearing all of these things. And then the drumbeat that's behind all of this is that, yep, Vince has got his finger on the pulse of all of these activities. And no matter what people say about how much Triple H is in charge, no matter when he rolls out for the post-Mania press conferences of the big dog, everybody seems to think that Vince is fully back or as close to being back as he's going to get, but he's got his thumb and imprint on everything. And so I'm really interested to see where Vince finds his way with Endeavor, with Ari Emanuel, with Dana White, if they have to be kind of together in certain things. Interesting folks like Pat McAfee that kind of could go in between these worlds. It's a fascinating situation. But I think the biggest thing that we're going to figure out moving forward over the next couple months is how influential, how much finger on the pulse that Vince McMahon has in this company.
Yeah.
And I think that is a big, I think that turns everything.
Yeah. Two things real quick in response to everything you just said. So I agree with you completely. I think one thing, speaking to the issue of like realness and WWE and UFC and how's that all going to fit together, a story that I think we probably all saw, but because of the timing of it, it flew under the radar a little bit because it was in the lead up to WrestleMania, was about a month ago. There was a story that went across, news outlets about how Vince McMahon and WWE are trying to lobby, state legislators to legalize betting on WWE matches. And that is, especially in hindsight now, clearly the idea is we want some kind of, again, synergy where UFC betting, WWE betting, it can all be done together. And that, I'm sure, like to the point that we were making earlier, like they were probably 99% done with that deal at the time that they're having those conversations, at the state in terms of state policy. And the other thing is, I think we are going to get a big clue about exactly how involved Vince is moving forward this Friday, because the sort of the conventional wisdom is, yes, he was more heavily involved, especially with Monday Night Raw, because he was in LA for WrestleMania and for media stuff in the wake of the deal. This Friday, I think they're in Seattle or somewhere in the Pacific Northwest. The thinking is, if he makes the trip and he's on hand for that show, then he's just back, and we basically are going to roll back the clock 9-10 months or whatever it is. If he doesn't make the trip, then it's like, okay, he's going to be maybe high level stuff, but the last week, or Monday was a bit of an outlier. If that's the case, obviously I think it's better for the company, it's better for creative, it's better for fans moving forward. So I'm not quite ready to say that he's fully back yet in terms of creative, but if he's there Friday, like if he's on hand, then I think the answer is yeah, he is.
Without hijacking the show forever about this, let me ask one thing too. A lot of things, hinges on Vince McMahon, his desire for control, for power. It's been his life. Had some woke billionaire like Jeff Bezos offered Vince $13.5 billion, $14 million, but through Bezos and his lawyer said, Vince, we want to buy this property and company. We can't afford to have you as a member of this organization anymore because, you understand you've had a lot of bad press, but we want to pay you handsomely to have you kind of go away. Would Vince have even entertained a discussion if we're talking $2.5 billion more dollars, or was that never even an option? The contingents of selling this was to retain some control that he felt like he was losing.
I think he definitely is interested in control, but I don't think that would have necessarily been the be-all, end-all. I think this is a difference between, say, Vince and like Dan Snyder. Dan Snyder obviously he knows he's on his way out, and he would gladly, I think, sell to basically the highest bidder, even if it is Jeff Bezos, who he doesn't like. I think he would be fine with that. In Vince's case, the reason I think that he would not find that deal attractive is, yes, the creative part is the creative aspect is a piece of it, but I think the bigger piece is, and especially if you listen to like the interviews that he did earlier this week, Vince believes that based on what Endeavor has done to the value of UFC, the same thing is going to happen to the WWE side of the business. And so I think from Vince's perspective, he's like, look, I can get more money today, but this is the only money. Like, this is it. This is the end. And of course, to us, it's like, what's the difference? 9 billion, 13 billion. You're not going to live long enough to spend it all. But I think from Vince's perspective, he would say 5 years from now, the value of what I own as part of this company and what the remuneration I'm getting from the company is going to be more than what Bezos is offering me today, which would be a one-time payment. Now, for the rest of it, it's like, if I'm 77, I'm like, yeah, I'll take your 13 and spend my remaining years on some island that I own. But yeah, I don't think Vince thinks that way.
Vince doesn't want to be on an island. Vince wants to be in Seattle writing SmackDown Friday.
He wants to be on the island of relevancy.
I think that control has a lot to do with it. Not necessarily in the control that, he has to be 100% the steward. I think this particular deal and what they were doing, the fact that he remains kind of chairman of what WWE is actually important to him. I do agree that, valuations matter and legitimacy and moving up the clock. I don't think he takes a buyout and leaves, period. I don't think there's no amount of money that you could have offered him from anyone. I don't care if it was Donald Trump himself, that he would have willfully said, this is my number and I will walk away from the industry. So that I don't think was a starter. I think there was this is the number in collaboration with, I know that if not me directly, Triple H, you know what I mean? Like, wrestling people will be in charge of the wrestling business. And I do think that's important, because let's like, hey, if we're calling what it is, everybody knows Ari Emanuel, everybody knows who his family is. The fact that, he can work with Dana White, they are not politically, let's just say the Emanuel family and Dana White probably are not politically aligned based off of everything I know about the Emanuel family. So with that said, I'm pretty confident that it was much more to do with, this is the number I like, this is the deal structure that I like, and also I believe that I'm looking at what Endeavor did with UFC, and I feel like this is actually maybe even not number evaluation wise, but I think there's a path to legitimacy there that I think that we may, even to this day, because WWE seems to be so ubiquitous now, Vince and everybody remembers those days where it was foreign to see WWE on SportsCenter. It was foreign to have the heavyweight champion sit in on the morning talk shows and come on Good Morning America. That was Vince's goal all along, was to move WWE to a place where it was as legitimate as, Major League Sports getting featured on SportsCenter talking about his product. That I remember reading about that years ago. Yep. And so I think it has a lot to do with all of that.
Well, TG's moniker is right. Vince, in the end, did win totally. The billionaire got more billions. Yep. He still seemingly has an element of control of his company that we may not even know yet how much control and how little he may have ceded. But, we're going to find out.
And one thing I would be very interested to know, and of course, these details I don't think will ever get out unless somebody does something probably unethical. I'll guarantee you that, to your point, Elliot, that there is, like, Endeavor certainly retains the right to terminate Vince McMahon, but the penalty that must be in that deal has got to be enormous. I mean, just gigantic, because otherwise they would do to him what Ted Turner did to the Crockett's, where it's like, you're a consultant for a year or whatever, and then you just kind of go away.
And you're out. Yeah.
Yep.
You're out.
Yep.
So, and that's not foreign in business at all. When you buy another business, usually you retain a person for a year, CEO or whatever.
Yeah.
We're not going to go through everything that took place because we'll be here forever.
Let's do match by match. No, match by match. We're doing every single one. Let's do it.
We're not doing it. We've got so much to talk about. But I do want to talk. I want to talk about some of the big stuff.
Yeah.
I want to talk about some of the big stuff. And I don't know if this is considered a big stuff. So this is the borderline baseline of what we're talking about. Austin Theory retains. First match, WrestleMania 1, the kicking off. John Cena comes out. It was a really great Make-A-Wish segment. That's one thing about John Cena that I will forever give him credit for. He has granted more wishes to Make-A-Wish kids than any other professional athlete in the world by a lot, not by a little. And he seems to really, really spend time and really give those kids an amazing experience. He had a bunch of them on the ramp walk with him as he made his way out for his return. But as we all predicted, I think we're all correct on this. Austin Theory retains.
I was not. I called Cena.
You called Cena?
I did call Cena because not with a whole lot of confidence. But I'll say this about, and I think you're going to ask for our impressions of that. Honestly, like, I was not all that impressed with how the whole thing was presented. Not a lot of build up. Cena came out a few weeks ago. The guy's busy. Everyone kind of knows what it is when you get Cena. It felt very going through the motions. Like, this is, you think about an old veteran, a former champion. You're there to put over the younger guy. That's all like in theory. This felt like almost like a one-act dramatization of that conversation you hear about. I didn't think it had a lot of intensity. Cena does his Make-A-Wish thing. He comes out to see Cena sort of eat a pin in 7 minutes, getting his moves in, getting Theory to tap out. There's no post-match drama.
It was 11 minutes, but
I walked away sort of like feeling like, okay, here's the best thing. Remember that scene in Ragnarok where Matt Damon and Henry's brother are acting out like the events of the previous movie? Mm-hmm. This felt like John Cena's acting out like how The Rock sort of like went to Hollywood, left wrestling. Didn't feel as authentic. I love Cena for your reasons, Mark, for other reasons, but like to me, it felt a little flat because Cena, we know you love the business. We know you owe Vince a ton. We know the veterans are supposed to go out and lay down, but like this felt a little too like manufactured, and Cena looked like he had a little too much fun doing it. So I gave it a C+.
Tom, what was your thoughts on?
I figured Theory would win just because it made a lot more sense for him to win. It was impractical for John Cena to be the United States champion at this point. Obviously, John Cena is going to want to be very careful with what he does in the ring. Isn't going to want a ton of matches.
Then use him differently. Don't have an actual match. Then use him differently.
He's so bad right now.
I was okay with it. I was like, okay, this makes sense. Theory is a tremendous talent, especially at the age that he is, and I think that it made sense for Cena. The thing that occurred to me during the match was like, man, it isn't like this is the first time Cena has put over somebody at WrestleMania. I mean, especially lately, like for all of the jokes about like LOL Cena wins for a decade, like he Bray Wyatt, The Undertaker, Theory, I'm probably leaving somebody out. But I mean, that's kind of been his thing, and I'm fine with it. I think Cena's fine with it. I thought it was all fine. It was not, my expectations for that match were not high, and I think it was fine.
I think it was a good way to start night one.
Yeah.
If you're a kid, if you're a Cena fan, was it a great way to start night one?
I love Austin Theory, so
yeah, I like Austin Theory too.
I thought that this was appropriate because I don't think Cena was going to be back and champion and so forth. I wanted the insufferable Austin Theory, speech afterwards, like, you know what I mean? And I got a little bit of it in the, like, in between matches, like later in the night, they cut to Theory, who was just like talking trash. And I was just like, I love it. I love everything about it. It made sense to me. And I guess as much as I like surprises, I also love things that just make sense to me. This was one of those that made sense. We will not talk about it because I don't think it's worth talking about at this point, but the Street Profits did go over everyone else in their tag team match. I thought it was a really good match. You called Street Profits, EJ?
We did. Yep.
You did. I called Viking Raiders. Tom,
you did call Viking Raiders.
You called Street Profits.
Yeah.
Yep.
Now looking back on some of the things we already talked about, there's a reality show now with Tez and Bianca. There's a lot of things that we're selling here. I just think Viking Raiders deserve better. I do. I will admit that. But let's move on. because I thought this could be the match of the night. I don't think it wound up being the match of the night, but Seth freaking Rollins does go over Logan Paul. I think I had that. Would you guys have?
I had Seth.
Yeah, yep. Like he's not going to eat a pin from Logan Paul.
I continue to be amazed by Logan Paul.
He's such a natural. I mean, I
think he's a natural. I think he's a phenomenal athlete. Did not like the only thing I did not like, and here's the reason why I didn't like it. If it'd been Jake Paul in the prime thing, I would have loved it. Mm-hmm. I know who KSI is only because my son and YouTube and some of that stuff.
I had no idea.
I just didn't think for WrestleMania type pop, I think it needed to be Jake. I think it needed to be Jake, or it needed to be a wrestler that somebody was familiar, like Dexter Lumis or whatever. You know what I mean?
Or how about Russell Crowe dressed as a priest?
Yeah, something like that. Something like that. But I for what it was, honestly, I thought Logan Paul's had better performances in the sense of just what the match was. I think Seth is a complete professional, does all the things that he needs to do. Obviously, I love the ring entrance. I thought that was really good. But for me, it's not much to talk about. Seth goes over Logan Paul. I don't know if you guys have any comments on it.
Well, go ahead.
Just that Logan Paul. I mean, Seth is obviously just a great pro wrestler. Logan Paul, to me, continues to be impressive for a guy who's had 4 matches, something like that. I mean, just everything he does just seems like it comes naturally to him, and he does stuff that one thing I'll say about Logan Paul that really is astounding to me is that he will do things in matches that other pro wrestlers who have been doing it for 15 years do, and he does it better than they do, and that's just what blows me away. It's like I mean, sure, good athlete, but there are other guys who are good athletes who try to be pro wrestlers and can't. You know, the skill set doesn't quite translate, and he just, for whatever reason, he can do it. So,
and his contract apparently has now expired. I hope he gets extended.
That's a work.
You think it's a work? You think he's going to show back up somewhere and re-up? I hope so.
Yeah, because when they first signed him, I mean, they made a big deal out of it that it was a multi-year.
Multi-years.
Okay, well then
I think they're just hoping we forget.
That's just sort of his explanation for why he's going to be off for a handful. He'll make some appearance. I mean, to not have him at SummerSlam, I think would be a miss. So I hope he's in it for the semi-long haul. He's got a lot of other, irons in the fire.
It was at least a 2-year deal when he signed.
Well, good. I hope he continues with it because he is entertaining when he's out there. I can look past some of the sophomore shit talking because we're talking about pro wrestling, so it's all sophomore to an extent. But yeah, I dig him. I don't need him unless he's going to commit to it fully. I don't need him in any high profile title matches, but he is a hell of an athlete, and he has a hell of a moveset already, so I like it. But I'm glad Seth won.
All right, I said we weren't going to go match by match. I'll try not to do that. I will say this: Damage Control deserves better, and they didn't break up, so I don't know what the hell's going on here.
Who knows? I mean, I think and I think
I thought it was a waste. I thought it was a waste of an opportunity and a waste of a time slot.
People who are following Bayley are concerned right now with her time got cut apparently on Monday Night Raw too. They're of course attributing that to Vince. Who knows? But people who watch Bayley are concerned about her happiness right now with some of the changes that are going on. She doesn't seem to be getting a great opportunity in WWE right now, and for good or for bad, her teammates aren't turning on her, nor is she getting any W's. So, reason to be concerned for Bayley.
Do they bury Damage Control?
I think that depending on who's pulling some of the strings, yes, I think they do.
Well, and I would just say this. I mean, I think that we're entering an era right now, at least before things get more clarity, where I really think that for at least for the next little bit, and maybe for the last few weeks, anything that good that WWE does is going to be attributed to Triple H, and anything that people don't like is going to be attributed to Vince.
Sure.
But the reality is that Damage Control was like some of the other people that Triple H has brought back. It's like, oh, they come back and it's cool, and then it's just like, what's happening? What's going on?
Yeah.
So I would actually like to see them at this point just like
really? You're over
do something.
Damage Control. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, of course, I have been pining for Bailey to become a face for a couple of years now, so I'm sort of biased. But yeah, I think they're not even treading water at this point.
Well, I mean, here's the thing: the Trish Stratus, Lita, Becky Lynch stuff makes no sense to me. I hate it, so it just does nothing.
I don't get it either.
I think if they were truly, you read these, you don't really know if they're truly trying to get some feature with Lita and Trish for SummerSlam, then you would have pulled the trigger already. I don't even need to see that. I think it's sort of like even past that too. I love seeing them both on my screen, but as active competitors, I didn't think I needed it, and it turns out I probably don't.
Yeah.
Let's go to one of my favorite build-ups, and I mean, I had this right. I will admit it, but which makes me happy. But Dom versus his father Rey Mysterio.
Oh man,
yeah,
Dom's ring entrance was going to be the greatest thing I've ever seen in my life. I mean, it was. I think prison
fantastic.
Guard, I think it was shackles.
It was excellent.
It was amazing. But Hall of Fame weekend, Rey Mysterio with the family side by side with Bad Bunny now setting up what's going to happen at Backlash in Puerto Rico. I think Rey Mysterio goes over his son Dom. He captivates an amazing weekend for himself, a truly historic weekend for the legend Rey Mysterio. Sans what happened on Monday night, but. Any thoughts on Rey versus Dom?
This was the only night one that I missed, and
yep.
I just thought Rey will do the favor for his son because his son has completely transformed himself in the last 6 to 8 months or whatever it's been, and this would be sort of getting him into that next level, but didn't happen. And there's no scenario where Bad Bunny loses in Puerto Rico. By the way, that is not
a riot scenario.
They
would legitimately riot.
I would have thought that Rey would have been insistent that he puts over Dom.
I'm with you. That was my thinking.
That the only reason I'm accepting this Hall of Fame honoree is so I can have that moment because I plan on putting my son over. He's done a great job. He's earned it. And Dom, you could have made an argument Dom deserved the victory. His entrance was fantastic.
Nope and nope.
Nope. I hope it wasn't Rey's ego, and say, hey, next year, Bun. It wasn't. Rey's a legend. He's deserving. I even liked Conan's Hall of Fame speech. I'm not a huge Conan fan, but he spoke from the heart when he inducted him. Yeah, I mean, they either need to let Dom's going to lose in Puerto Rico also, whether it's against Bad Bunny in singles or against
Bad Bunny. So
it's sort of further to Rhea Ripley's not even helping him at this point. Damian Priest is certainly not helping him. Neither is Finn Balor. So
not only is Rey going to lose in Puerto Rico, but if you watch the way that they did that angle on Monday night, he wouldn't even they wouldn't even let him throw a punch after he got hit twice by Bad Bunny. Damian Priest came in and kind of, settled business, but Dom against the civilian, couldn't get a shot in. It's I think we kind of see where this is going to go.
For sure. But that'll be cool. That's going to be, we talked about the reaction to Sami Zayn in Montreal. Imagine Bad Bunny in Puerto Rico.
And Bad Bunny actually can go. That's the good thing about this. Bad Bunny can do something. He's no Logan Paul. Before Logan Paul, Bad Bunny might have been the best kind of celebrity wrestler that we had.
For sure.
You mentioned Rhea. Rhea defeats Charlotte Flair by pinfall.
Good match.
Great match. No, absolutely amazing match. I don't know what Charlotte Flair does because she takes this insane amount of time off in my mind, and she comes back and she looks phenomenal. She looked shredded, ripped, and the greatest shape of her life. She's by far, I think we've always talked about this, when it comes to actual professional wrestling in the women's division, I don't think there's a professional wrestler in the women's division better than Charlotte Flair.
I agree.
And she really delivered an amazing match. Rhea did an amazing job as well. It's very rare in a match where you lose and lose it in the fashion that Charlotte did, that I felt like most people walked away from the match talking about how great Charlotte was. And I think that's what happened here, even though Rhea Ripley obviously gets the pin, does an amazing move, finish a riptide off the second rope, and gets the pinfall. I think the story of the match was how amazing Charlotte Flair is at wrestling. And I think the news has come out now that Charlotte's going to take some significant, even more time off and kind of fade away from TV and let Rhea Ripley reign supreme. Guys, EJ, what's your thoughts? You start, and then we'll go to Tom.
The only real problem I had with that match, because it was such a impressive finishing move, and I definitely understand the gravity of the moment. Charlotte is taking this time off. She wants to get into apparently she wants to get into bodybuilding, which is why her body sort of looked the way it did. She's leaned up some, so who knows if she'll be taking this time off to do some other competitions. The only thing I didn't really like was the way she kind of no-sold it right after the finish. Like, you've built Rhea up to be this monster.
She was smiling.
She was laughing. She was smiling.
Floor on the apron.
She was giving sort of a good on ya, Rhea. Right. She even tweeted like the championship's in good hands, and all that's well and good, but you don't make it so obvious. You can tweet something better than that to convey those emotions, rather than sort of like looking proud of the person who should have just destroyed you. My only problem with it, kind of a small problem, but those little details do matter. I don't think it really takes away from Rhea, but I kind of walked. That was one of my last moment of what otherwise was a fantastic match.
I could not agree with you more. Bell to bell, I thought it was fantastic. I, as you know, am driven crazy by their insistence of making Charlotte a face, because she is such a natural heel, much like Logan Paul is a natural heel. And the only thing I didn't like about that whole segment was what happened immediately after the match, where she instead of doing like, boy, I just got, wrecked by this really impressive finishing move, it was just like oh shucks, you got me, kid, I'm proud of you. It's like, no, that is not the appropriate reaction in this situation. If it had been like a legitimate face against another legitimate face, I think, other than the no selling, I think that's perfectly fine. And then maybe you do a handshake or something like that. For that match, and that for the character that Rhea is, that was a reaction. I think it undermined Rhea a little bit, and it certainly, I don't think did Charlotte any favors. So I don't know, but that's a quibble. But the match overall was terrific.
Was it the best? Was it the best match of the night?
Remind me what else was night one. This is a few days ago now.
We've just gotten to, except the main event, everything but the main event.
Yeah, and not counting Brock and Omos.
No, that's night two.
That was the opening match of night two.
The question was, is this the best match of night one?
From an in-ring wrestling standpoint, I would say yes.
Mm-hmm.
The main event story-wise that was the big appeal there.
No, but I agree. I think it was the best match of night one. Let's quickly, not quickly, but let's talk about the main event and the fall of the Bloodline. We'll skip over all the Pat McAfees of the world. The Usos, the Bloodline, night one, I would say probably in the most predictable outcome ever. The Usos drop to Sami Zayn, Kevin Owens, who are now the new Universal Tag Team Champions. And this started the fall of the Bloodline. TG, start with you. I think everybody in the group called this, but what was your reaction?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the Bloodline storyline is maybe the greatest storyline in the history of WWE. I think it certainly is the best storyline that has lasted this long.
Mm-hmm.
Most of the other great stories in WWE history have usually been like maybe a 1-year build to get to a WrestleMania match, and then there's kind of a reboot after that. In this case, in order to prolong this storyline further, you have to have something that shakes things up. And I think that the Usos, especially if you're WWE creative and you're like, look, we know Roman's going to retain, this title change has to happen. Because if they retain and Roman retains, then it's like, well, now what do? We just kind of have status quo from here on. This adds a new dimension to the story. We've already seen a little bit of it with how is Roman going to sort of interact or not with his cousins. And I think also, it sends the crowd home happy. it's sort of something that Sammy gets because as a, I hate to say consolation prize, but a consolation prize because he was probably never going to be the guy who beat Roman Reigns. And as it turns out, neither was Cody. But we'll get to that. So I thought it was good, satisfying, predictable. And I do think this has been a theme during the Triple H era. I'll just make this final point. Pay-per-views especially, the week-to-week programming has been better because of how good he is with continuity and sort of the structure of the show. But I think the pay-per-views have also been good, but good and predictable. And I think that if Triple H is going to remain, the creative force long-term, good is the most important thing, but I think that'll be something that he has to maybe work on is, can we do things that are unpredictable in terms of outcomes, but also still make sense within the story we're telling? And so far, there hasn't been that much of that, but the wrestling has been great and the stories have been good as well. So I was happy with it.
EJ, what did you think of the main event of night one?
I think TG sums it up. I knew that was going to be the outcome. I just wanted to see how it kind of came to be, if anyone was going to interfere. Turns out it was very, very smooth how they transitioned everything. Everyone got their flowers at the end. It's what needed to be happened. That was getting a little stale. And again, if you're not going to take the world title off and completely dismantle the bloodline, you got to add some more intrigue. I like Kevin and Sammy as partners rather than enemies overall. Don't really know how long this will last. They're not going to carry it until next WrestleMania, but I'll be curious to see what tag team can step up or what people get put together. But overall, night one, of all the events that happened over the weekend, I'm talking about starting from SmackDown to Stand Delivered to the Hall of Fame to both nights of WrestleMania to Raw to Dynamite, I thought this was my overall favorite night of the entire weekend, was this WrestleMania night one.
That's great. And I did love the finish. I love the 3 Halua kicks on Jey Uso and the crowd just going crazy on that last one and him getting the pin. That was really exciting. I agree with everything you guys said. This story had to be elevated. It could not be elevated with Usos retaining. So it had to be Sammy and Kevin, especially as we all talked about. I predicted Roman would retain as well, night 2. A little bit different reasons than I think one of the reasons we talked about earlier in the show that has to have a face of the company per se. But I really felt strongly that Roman was going to retain, and this was the title change that we got. Overall, night 1 I thought was an amazing night. Let's jump into night 2.
Just to recap, I missed. I picked John Cena and I picked Dom. Those are really the only 2 I missed. Cheats. I think you only missed Viking Raiders.
Yep, I think I only missed Viking Raiders.
And TG, I think you missed Dom also. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So,
all right.
Good night all around from all of us.
Let's just jump into night 2 with the F5 heard around the world as Brock Lesnar did his Brock Lesnar thing. F5 to Amos. I thought Amos was actually much more impressive than I would have thought. Huge man. The match lasted under 5 minutes. And it's exactly what we predicted.
Exactly.
Yeah. And it did what it needed to do. I was fine with the match. I was like, great, short. Everybody did what they, Brock sold like a champ. He got the F5, super impressive. Checked every box it needed to.
Crowd seemed to enjoy it.
Crowd was super into Brock.
I loved it. When Brock got almost up for the F5, I was like, that is impressive. Like, that's awesome. I also predicted this. Ronda and Shayna Baszler in just over 5 minutes beat all the other jobber tag teams. I don't even know why that was a WrestleMania match.
They weren't even tag teams. Like they were just thrown together like 3 weeks ago.
Right, it was insane. But those 2 can't lose in this scenario. They have to win in this scenario.
Yeah,
right.
They delivered. Let's go to what could be the match of the night of night 2, which is Gunther retaining over Sheamus and Drew McIntyre. Again, if you're talking about predictability, it did everything we wanted it to do. You want to talk about awesomeness? It was awesome. It was an amazing match. And I would expect nothing less from those 3 individuals.
Well, I really thought they were going to give Sheamus the rub here and let him get his career Grand Slam. That's going to have to wait because as I said, beginning of the show, the product that WWE is selling both to fans and to companies are some real dominant figures right now. Bianca and
I
Roman.
think
Gunther's not necessarily a central part of that plan, but up until jury again, you gotta say with everything now. Who knows what's going to happen with Gunther? Where that future looked a little bit more on solid footing a few weeks ago, even though he's still the champ.
I think he's golden. I think he's great.
Well, who knows who the people who are making decisions are going to feel about that, because that's sort of got to come to play too. There are lots of reports that as of maybe a year ago, they were going to bury Gunther. So do you believe that or not? And if you do, that's coming from the mind of one person who now maybe has more influence than before. I don't want to bring everything back to Vince, but like Triple H has made some missteps. Vince can really F things up for fans of people who have been fans for the last year, who have felt revived, who have felt re-energized. There is a lot of angst, and it comes through sort of in different ways sometimes when you worry about the future of Gunther. Like, I figured he'd be headlining WrestleMania 40 next year. He's on that trajectory. Now I'm not so sure, but Gunther's my man. Put on a great match. I think they have a star in him if they wanted.
I think this is one of my favorite WrestleMania matches ever. I thought it was
a great match.
The best match, I think, of the weekend, and certainly not. I mean, it's different than like the Charlotte Rhea Ripley match is a different kind of match, but the fact that this match reminded me a little bit of. I mean, I know this is kind of sacred ground to tread upon, but it reminded me a little bit of a WWE version of like late 90s All Japan, when those guys just absolutely like legitimately just hit each other as hard as they possibly could. And I think that, to your point about Gunther, I share those concerns, Elliot, because you're right. Right before Triple H took over, they were doing an angle where Gunther and I forget it. What's his new name now? He used to be
Pete Dunne, Butch.
No.
His LA Knight, Max Dupree.
His one of the other Imperium guys. What's his name?
Kaiser.
Right.
Ludwig Kaiser.
Ludwig Kaiser, but he had a different name in NXT. That's what's throwing me off. Mm-hmm. As did Walter / Gunther. But they were doing a thing where like they were having a falling out, and and it was a very sort of trite, cliched type thing, and it didn't really advance either one of them. And then as soon as Triple H took over, like that got thrown out the window. Imperium was reunited on the main roster, and they were off to the races. So my hope is that that Vince, if he is back in control, that he will be like, okay, I get it now. I see what has happened. But to your point, Elliot, what I think is definitely likely to happen is for the people who haven't really clicked that Vince previously got rid of, it's going to be bad news for them.
Oh, yeah.
I think you're going to see, again, this is predicated on Vince actually being like in the guy. I think you're going to see
Hit Row gets fired again.
Hit Row gets fired again. Kieran Cross gets fired again. Whatever's going to happen to Bray Wyatt, although there's nowhere to go.
Jonah, what's his name? Jonah Bronson Reed gets back. Gets out.
Bronson Reed might be okay because he's a big guy. He's a big guy.
But no, Vince was the guy that was like he ain't got it.
Yeah, but I think that again, I think for certain guys, especially if they're big guys, if they have done some work to kind of establish them now, I think Vince would be more open to sort of continuing the trajectory, at least in the short term, and just seeing what he's got, as opposed to.
Gunther's got to be in that category. Then.
Well, that's what I'm saying, and that's my hope. I mean, he has shown both in terms of his performance and as a champion that he is. I mean, if Vince can't see that he is legit, then Vince is truly just completely gone mentally.
Right, and it's definitely a lot worse for someone like LA Knight, who like we all know if given the chance was going to be great, but he hasn't been booked terrific to begin with. Vince has nothing to see to say, oh yeah, we're going to continue with this because Vince sees things a certain way. And
so does that mean Bray Wyatt goes?
Is he goes? I mean, where is he?
Right.
Goes where?
At this one, you remember me, biggest Bray Wyatt honk.
We remember.
I don't want to see a bunny on my screen. I don't want to see a QR code. Get back, get in the ring, do something weird, or don't show up at all. Like that, I'm done. I'm done.
And so, like, the bad news for like LA Knight, as an example, is even under the Triple H regime, and I joke about this in the group chat all the time. I'm like, the guy's obviously really over, but he is booked to lose every time he wrestles.
Vince won't give the benefit of the doubt on that.
Or Triple H doesn't give him the benefit of the doubt.
Well, that's my point. It's like Triple H is like just jobbing him out every week.
I think he's not. See, he's not jobbing. He's still getting reactions. Triple H, I don't think, has used him great, but I think Triple H knows what he has and like is going to.
Does he? Do you remember who the first person Braun Breaker beat was out of nowhere? Just showed up one day. You know who that was?
It could have been a lot of people.
LA Knight.
It could have been a lot. LA Knight could have been in catering. He's not in catering.
No, I'm just saying they didn't think he was good enough to beat Braun Breaker on the night he was fighting for the title. By the way, all right, I really hope that they do the right thing by Gunther. Gunther is amazing.
Me too.
I think they've figured out what type of matches, like going back to the NXT Walter Dragunov matches, like these NXT UK, I think, or whatever it was.
Mm-hmm.
He is won over, which is, it's actually, let's not take that for granted. It's very difficult to win over an American crowd with the character that he has, and he's done it. Like, they love that guy.
Yeah.
And I don't know where Sheamus and Drew McIntyre go. I was over Drew McIntyre like a year ago.
There have been rumors that Drew McIntyre's contract is almost up and he hasn't resigned. So he may be gone.
But well, again, we'll see what happens. If Vince stays,
Vince loves it. So
Drew McIntyre's in. I love this. We'll talk about future stuff down the road because we want to keep this thing going. I would probably say the most disappointing of the most disappointing match of the night for me, Hell in a Cell, Edge, Finn Balor. Not only was it just not clicking, then Finn gets busted open. There's stitches in the middle of the ring. It's all kinds of stuff. It was just all kinds of bad. And then the Demon lose. I just didn't. I thought it was a train wreck from start to finish. And I think it had potential. Like, it's almost like, remember a little while ago when they did the Edge Randy Orton best damn wrestling match ever build up, and then it was just like a regular wrestling match. Like, I think they do that too much with like Edge and Finn and people like that. And it just, to me, it's just a letdown. So it was by far my disappointing match of the night. I hope Finn's okay. Obviously, I like Finn Balor a lot, but they just haven't figured this out.
I feel like that match was a little bit snake bit, for lack of a better word. Like so a couple things. The first is that they kept pretending like this feud hadn't already come to a natural end. It came to a natural end a while ago, and they just kept acting like Edge had not vanquished the Judgment Day, which he did. And so that was my whole thing about, like, and this is the only match that I missed on night 2, because my thought was, okay, if you're bringing back the Demon to perpetuate this thing, Demon's got to go over for multiple reasons. Edge can't win again, and the Demon character has been pretty protected, although now that's out the window too. But then the other thing was, and we talked about this a little bit in the group chat, but like, I'm not a huge fan of like really bloody matches. I think there's a time and a place, and I'm okay with that. But like, to have just an inadvertent cut and then to actually stop the match, like in the middle of a match of WrestleMania for like several minutes, is just jarring, especially when it happens to a guy whose character is supposed to have supernatural overtones. It just really takes you out of it. And again, that's not Edge's fault or Finn Balor's fault, but I think it undermined, again, that's the word I used before, undermined sort of the, I guess, suspension of disbelief, whatever you want to call it, engagement with the audience of the match. And then it just, I mean, some of the spots were really cool, and it was all fine for the most part. But that was the only match all weekend that disappointed me. because there were other matches where it's like expectations are low, like the women's tag match, expectations were low, and it was like, yeah, that was what I expected, no big deal. Brock and Moss expectations weren't that high, and it exceeded them because it checked every box in 5 minutes. This was one where I was like, Hell in a Cell, Edge is great, obviously. The Demon, I'm a fan, and it was just like, that wasn't my cup of tea. So
yeah, two things on this real quick. I felt the same way about you about the blood angle. It did kind of mess everything up. They did have to cut away for many minutes.
Yep.
At one point, you saw a medic in the ring tending to him.
Yep.
Yeah.
I think after the match, I don't know. Did you guys see Finn Balor's tweet that showed the cut? I took back most of the things I said about it afterwards because that looked like a pretty large and pretty severe.
No, it was really
cut.
nasty. Yeah,
it was a good 2 inches. It looked deep. It looked like the kind of thing. And now it was hard to see what was happening to his face because of the makeup.
Paint.
But I have a feeling that their hand was sort of forced because I believe it was really the well-being of Finn rather than trying to prevent blood from being seen on TV or being shown. I think they actually had to tend to Finn because this was a cut that was
I agree with you.
Was not going to heal.
Yeah.
Was not going to heal on its own.
Yeah.
As the match progressed, and it could have gotten very bad, and mostly just for Finn. Other thing I'd say is, I think we were sort of implied promised to get a Brood Edge entrance. We did get a Brood entrance, but it wasn't the Brood original theme. There was talk that Gangrel was going to be brought out to California, whether he was or was not, who knows, because he wasn't used. If he had come out from the bottom, just like the Brood did, I'd have liked that. Also, that silver mask didn't do it for me either. Like I didn't understand what that was. We had never. Well, it just one of Edge saw it in a online shop, thought it was cool, and contacted the owner and probably had to make him one for WrestleMania. Like Triple H had all those crazy get-ups. It just didn't seem to make a lot of sense, and I would have liked to have seen really Edge in the white long sleeve shirt coming up from the ground, that just like the Brood. And then that's what I would have preferred. That's what I thought we were getting. We didn't get that. That match also let me down.
I'm comfortable saying this. I'm over Edge. Like, it's a great comeback story. He's a phenomenal wrestler. I don't necessarily need Edge.
He's gonna he'll get his retirement in Toronto this summer or whatever, and then
I'm over Edge.
I'm over this feud. The feud has gone on way too long, and they're just circling the drain.
Since Edge's return, he hasn't done anything for me that's gotten me excited.
I do want Jeff Hardy off my TV before Edge, but
I like the feud with where he was kind of a tweener with Roman Reigns going into WrestleMania, and then Daniel Bryan was added. I enjoyed that. I thought that was a good story.
Main event time. We're not going to talk about the Shane O'Mac of it all.
So Shane, completely embarrassing.
We're not going to talk about that.
Next Tuesday show dedicated to Shane.
Yeah, let's move on. We were already an hour and 7 in.
You should be ashamed of yourself, Shane.
Let's talk about the main event again. I thought Roman Reigns would retain.
Yeah,
I didn't put any of the other stuff that we talked about at the top of the show into my factor. I just thought, is this the time for the Tribal Chief to end this run? And the answer was no. I actually got more convinced when I saw things like Dustin Rhodes and other people like tweeting, finish the story and all that. It was almost like a giveaway. Like, he's not going to win. Like, what is happening here? Then they did the part where it's like his family's there and Brandy and -1 is there. And I'm like, it was great theater, right? It's great theater. But all of that was like, to me, it was not, it just did not sound, it didn't give me he's going over the top and he's going to carry the company. It was, hey, look, this is main event at WrestleMania. Congratulations, kid. You're as Paul Heyman would say, you're on the island of relevancy now, and you're going to get knocked off. One quick thing. I thought the match was fine. I didn't think it was overly amazing. I was disappointed in the end. I really would have liked something more spectacular than Solo, giving the Samoa Spike to Cody to put him over. I would have liked something cooler, maybe even a Trinity Fatu appearance. I don't know, something. I also will say the thing about this, again, leading up to this, which was I thought was very weird, but it was also like it was weird, but it was, and I talked about it with you guys in the group chat. He did a BT Sports Errol Hawani interview before the match. Like, it was before his WrestleMania match with Cody Rhodes. If we keep to the tradition of what those interviews have been, they have been very little kayfabe and very much like real life, like Sami Zayn talking about like what it meant to get to this point.
Right.
Paul Heyman talking about like what he watches out, to track other wrestling companies and who he thinks are going to be stars completely. And Paul Heyman in his Errol interview saying, "I'm just talent. I'm not even creative anymore." They did, I stopped doing that a long time ago. But like, it was just this weird. If you watch the pre-match interview, Roman Reigns is 1,000% in kayfabe.
Yeah.
And would not give Ariel Hawani anything.
Which I respect, I gotta say.
I respect it.
Yeah.
It was just kind of weird. But my reaction was I liked what they did. Obviously, I loved Roman going over. Selfishly, there's parts of me that actually don't want to see Cody Rhodes as WWE champion ever. But I love the fact that the Bloodline at least keeps this part of the championship. EJ, what'd you think?
I have to acknowledge that it was a fantastic match because there were moments during it where I sort of saw what looked to be the setup for a go-home finish for Cody. They happened like 2 different times. And then when it was sort of snatched from him, I got the feeling, okay, this is how it's going to work. But then it looked like it was going to, as someone who's followed wrestling for 40 years, about the flows of the matches. And they legitimately had me riding that coaster with them during that. So I've got to give them props for that. I personally thought if Cody's going to come out, he's going to hug Brandy, hug his kid, fine. Giving the belt to number 1, that little surprise, huge. Like, I love when Forbidden Doors or don't nod your head, Sheets. You were bashing that in the group chat that night. I don't want to hear you say, yeah, that was awesome.
Elliot outing the group
your exact words were, this is ridiculous. I
didn't say it was awesome. I was acknowledging your comment of it. I thought I've already told you what I felt about it.
Well, I think it was
in this show, in this podcast.
When I was rewatching it, they did refer to him as John Huber's son. They didn't just refer to him as Brody Lee. They said they
said Luke Harper.
They said all of them.
They said John Huber, the former Luke Harper. So they did acknowledge his given name. I thought that was awesome. Great to see -1 there. I would have liked to have seen Cody win. I'm fine either way. I think this streak is just another kind of excellent chapter. But I do feel the time was right, but I don't necessarily feel they missed some big window because, dude, windows open and close all the time in wrestling.
Yeah,
it's fine. They could have done it and been successful at it and been great at it. Kind of my earlier comments in the show saying, like, given what the sale was like basically about to be announced, you knew this was the package that Endeavor was going to inherit. But like I said, the whole weekend was fine, given a couple of just unfortunate events, another rousing success. Roman kind of continues, and he was back on Monday, back at it, asking the crowd to acknowledge him. The chapter has started again. We're on to another year.
Tom, before you start, let me just say, if Brandy Rose and family and all that, like, so Rey Mysterio's family was a part of the storyline.
Yeah.
It makes 100% sense to me that Rey Mysterio's daughter and wife are there. They're fighting Dom. That's awesome. That makes me excited. Brandy Rose hasn't been on WWE TV since Cody Rhodes returned.
She's been missed in this household. I will just tell you that. She's been missed.
Be that as it may. What gets me upset is the idea that, like, he's going to come out and the baby's there and Brandy's there. And, like, I was like, this is the biggest match of his life. We don't know. Like, this is I thought it was ridiculous to me. I just thought it was stupid. And when I saw it, I wanted Roman to crush the guy even more.
Me personally, I like it as someone who thought Reigns was going to win and wanted Reigns to win. I liked it as a storytelling device because it makes Roman even more of a jerk. Because it makes Cody even more sympathetic as a face.
And yeah, I get what you're saying. Here's the thing: I have zero sympathy for Cody Rhodes. Period. I never have. And like he does not, to me, he does not ooze. I have trouble with Cody Rhodes being a face and being as over as he is. Like it's a problematic situation for me. I'm glad Roman's didn't.
Well, speaking of the group chat, I just scrolled back to see what my comment was at that match, and it was at the end. It was from me, all caps. F your dreams, Cody. That was my
Yep.
That was my reaction. I really liked this match. The only thing I'll say is it did feel so. I sort of have two minds about the ending sequence. I thought the first 30 minutes or whatever were just great and exactly what it needed to be. The sort of the end part of it, I felt like was maybe a little overbooked, but again, in a weird way, that's kind of a tribute to Dusty in a way. But what I liked about it was exactly what Elliot said, where it's like, even as somebody who was like, I think Roman's going to win this, there were moments, and especially in the last 15 minutes, where I was like, I think Cody might win. I think they're going to do it, especially when he held on for the second crossroads. I was like, oh man, like it's going to happen. I agree with you as well, Mark, that the only real criticism I have was it seemed like they understood, like, okay, we get what we want to do sort of during the beginning part of this match, and we definitely understand what the outcome is. We're not quite sure how to get not from A to B, but like, G to
the last 5 minutes.
Right. So what they did was they just went back to the Solo well, and I'm like, if you're gonna do that, either don't eject him, or like you said, Mark, like eject him, and then it's like, oh, Solo's not there, and the Usos are taken care of. So how's Roman going to get out of this? And then you introduce a new element to it, whatever that might be, something we haven't seen before. Instead, they sort of repeated something we've seen in the past. Ultimately, I think the outcome is the right one for right now, anyway. The big thing for me about why I thought that Roman was going to win was like, they're so close to 1,000, and they haven't had a guy get 1,000 since, I guess, Hulk Hogan. It would be weird, and it's sort of the same reason why in the Intercontinental title match, I had the same thought as Elliot, which is like, I wonder if they're going to let Sheamus like get a run with the IC title because it's the only one he's never won. Even though quietly it's like, well, not counting the Universal title, but let's not mention that. But ultimately, I was like, I think at least Triple H wants Gunther to be the all-time, like break the Honky Tonk Man's record, which I think that would be appropriate because Gunther is great. So same kind of logic for Roman. I think I don't know, because you guys alluded to it earlier in the show. I do think that Roman Reigns is a more attractive sort of lead guy from a business standpoint, especially right now. But I don't know that was really a factor in the ultimate decision to do it. I'm sure it didn't hurt, but from what everybody's been saying post WrestleMania, like kind of behind the scenes, is like, what I have heard is this, like, even after Vince was gone, whatever, this was always kind of the plan that they were like, we don't see Cody Rhodes, at least now, as being the world champion or being the guy who takes it off of Roman, which leads me to my final point. From my standpoint, and this is barring some other person coming into WWE that we're not anticipating, whether it's a UFC guy or somebody else from some other part of the pro wrestling.
Not Jay White.
Not Jay White. Good segue. The way that this story ends, or the way that this part of the story ends, is Roman Jay. That is the full circle. That is what this has all been building up to. I think that we've talked about this, but to me, the whole thing with Sammy and Jay is not doesn't really hate Sammy. He hates himself because he didn't have the guts to do what Sammy did. And I think eventually we get to a point, and maybe it's now in the wake of him losing the titles, we get to a point where we see Roman and Jay eventually come to blows again to sort of link everything back to the beginning of how all this started. And I think Jay is the guy who beats him again. Things can change, but I think that's where we're headed.
I think Jay and Roman will meet. I think Solo has now entered the conversation as someone who eventually might turn. I think they're going to still feel out how the crowd reacts to him as Roman's heavy for a few months, but I wouldn't want to discount Solo either. But I think I'm with you with Jay. If they don't really see Cody as being sort of championship material right now, and they maybe never really saw or didn't even really get too influenced by Sammy in the last year, something tells me Jay, with everything he's been part of, isn't really on a that much higher a level as far as being ready to carry that title even for a short period of time. So I think maybe, I'm also thinking like, is this title going to change hands anywhere other than WrestleMania? So are we talking WrestleMania 40? SummerSlam, I guess, but whatever they have now, Backlash, TLC, Clash of Champions, the Cardiff of the Castles, even the Saudi Arabia shows, nothing feels big enough now to end this run except at WrestleMania. So I think we have to legitimately entertain another year, WrestleMania 40. Now, can you go a whole year? Is that enough time for Solo or Jay? Or are they going to have to just because maybe are they going to have to pull something with the briefcase, Money in the Bank? Maybe some way they get to this. Will they still split the titles? Who knows? Yeah. But yeah, I mean, I can't see Roman losing on some even any other one of the big four, aside from maybe SummerSlam, that he's going to lose this title.
It would be weird at this point to do, assuming there's no other extenuating circumstances like an injury or health or anything like that. It would be weird to do it at any place other than WrestleMania. But I will say two quick things in response to what you said. Number one, there's always the possibility of splitting the titles, which is a way to keep Roman's streak intact, but also, free up the other championship or whatever. Mm-hmm. And that could happen conceivably at like a SummerSlam or something like that. The second point is, so I think because the story is so different and the way it has been played out on television and programming is so different. I think we have to think about it maybe a little differently. And so for me, it's not even like, did they believe that Cody could win the world title someday? I think the answer is yes. But for this particular story, I think they are thinking more in terms of what is the right ending to this story? Forget about the championships per se. What is the right ending to this story? Is it Cody beating Roman? I mean, maybe, but Cody wasn't even present for the first 2/3 of this story. I think that the story ends with Jay and Roman, just as it began with Jay and Roman, and that's why I think that ultimately he's the guy who does this. So we'll see.
We will see, and it's exciting to talk about. I agree with you, Elliot, that Roman Reigns reigns supreme for the foreseeable future. I actually don't think it'll be Jay. I don't think it'll be Cody. I don't know who it'll be. I think they've got to figure out a new story that they're going to build up and work this to a point where it becomes viable again. The one good thing about the Cody Rhodes story was it was a viable story.
Yes,
we had people
good story.
We had very much people on the fence about, hey, this could be his time. Who that next person is, I think in the next year, I think we will see a Roman Gunther something, right? Maybe it's title type thing. I don't know. It'll be an interesting thing to see. Again, there's some. If you guys, we didn't talk about this overall, but it was a big part to me of WrestleMania weekend, because if you do look at all of WrestleMania weekend in its totality, Stand and Deliver was amazing.
Yeah.
It was so good. And you had Braun Breaker and Carmelo Hayes in a main event that was really good.
Mm-hmm.
And you had some really amazing matches that were, really impressive stuff. Like Black and Gold brand. And it was back to the Black and Gold brand pay-per-view type stuff. And I don't know if it's a Breaker type person. They got it. Like, do you give Carmelo Hayes a year as the NXT champion, or do you bump him up? If you bump him up, where does Carmelo Hayes or someone like that fit? Because does that, but like, they're not exactly the same person, but Montez Ford and Carmelo Hayes are very similar. But he is gold. What they do. I mean, I don't want to belabor the point, but Stand and Deliver. If you haven't watched it, I went back and watched it over the weekend, from top to bottom. Even for wrestlers that you may not be familiar with, it was some good stuff. To put a bow on WrestleMania, I think, Tom, you summed it up really well. Really good pay-per-views, really good events, fairly predictable.
Yeah.
We don't have as much time to dig into some of the other stuff because we're already in an hour and a half. But really disappointing Monday after Mania.
Weird show.
Extremely weird show. And I think it had a lot to do with, let's get through these 2 days.
Yeah.
Let's get through this big announcement, and let's figure out like what happens next. And what happened next was a very convoluted, disjointed, failed to deliver a traditionally the biggest Mania of the year. Some of the things
biggest Raw
of the year. Some of the things that didn't happen are almost as kind of rumored that was going to happen that didn't happen. Whereas it, obviously more exciting than the things that did happen. The only return we had at the end of the day was Matt Riddle's return. There was no Braun Breaker debut. There was no, apparently, and these guys have really won me over in NXT, but there was no Pretty Deadly debut, which was supposed to debut on the main roster the Monday after Mania. They're really funny. They're really funny. So yeah, I just don't know what that show was, and kind of, I think, Tom, you're exactly right about Friday. I think Friday hopefully Monday didn't provide any clarity. So hopefully Monday provides some clarity on where the storylines go.
Well, I don't really like talking a lot about dirt sheet material, but if you've been following it, Triple H is going to open SmackDown again, like he did on Raw. Whether he's going to give a similar type announcement, kind of maybe concerning the Endeavor sale, saying that the things is going to, SmackDown's going to run just like it did before, just like it did with Raw. Who knows at this point? There's some speculation that there's an attempt online to get some hashtags trending, some chants about Vince trending for the Friday show. There's this very, an attempt to maybe try to, I think there's someone concerned about getting the show hijacked, not with CM Punk chants this time, but with fire Vince chants. We'll see. So, one school of thought is you get Triple H out there to kind of head that off. We'll see if that works or not. Can I ask you real quick, Cheats? Can we close the book on The Rock challenging Roman Reigns? Did that window close with this WrestleMania?
Yeah.
Is there any appetite to see that going forward?
No.
Okay.
Appetite to see it.
Yes. No. Yeah. Appetite to see it. Yes. Was this in Hollywood?
Yeah.
The best chance you had, in my mind, to get The Rock to come out at the and it was like after it was over, there was still this very long delay before they went off the air with like Roman walking up the ramp. I was praying for that music to break. That whole, Rock come out in LA and do something. And, when it didn't happen, I understand. But it's and I think it has a lot to do with a couple things. One of the things that they talked about early on was Rock didn't feel like he was in wrestling shape or wrestling physique. Yeah. That's one thing. But I also think that The Rock really is all in on this XFL thing.
Yeah.
And he doesn't want any perceived distractions from year one of the XFL being as successful as he can possibly make it.
Well, I think this was the window, and it didn't happen.
Yeah.
So I don't think we need to. I don't think we need to even explore it.
No,
personally.
I think it's over.
I think you could still see him do something where he interacts with Roman, but I don't think you're going to see a feud that leads to a match type thing.
Good.
Yeah, I don't think it's Philadelphia next year, right? I don't think that does it. Hollywood did it for me.
Mm-hmm.
Gentlemen, we do have to wrap this thing up. We talked a lot about Mania. I will say this. As disappointing as the Raw after Mania was, my spirits were lifted this week by what I think was probably the best AEW Dynamite of the year.
Yeah.
I really think, and we'll have to talk about this another time in detail, but the show that was put on, the 2 hours of entertainment that was put on by AEW this last Wednesday, from top to bottom, was the type of show, I think I put this with you guys in the chat, it was the type of show that made me really enjoy AEW. Like,
absolutely.
It was that good.
Can I make 2 quick comments about it?
Yeah.
So one thing is, I really think Tony Khan is, I think, very aware and very interested in what WWE is doing. And I think that he perceived, especially after that Raw that was kind of a dud, I think he was like, there's an opportunity here for us to do something big. And I think that the combination of all the different things that they were, the Wembley announcement, Jay White, all that stuff, I think that was not accidental. And of course, the big MJF thing, because they're in Long Island, that was no accident. And they are, I think he very smartly sort of pumped that show up as much as he could, precisely because I think people who were kind of bored watching Raw were going to maybe check this out for the first time in a while. Second thing is, what's really interesting to me, you guys alluded to at the top of the show, possibly certain creative decision, whether it's Vince or Triple H making the calls, certain creative decisions in WWE that are the result of considerations outside of simply the show. In that case, the business deal that was going on. What's been really interesting to me about AEW, and of course, I freely admit at this point, AEW is, I pretty much just fast forward through and watch highlights at this point. But what's really interesting to me about AEW is how there has been a major shift in almost a reversal of top heels and top faces, both men and women, have switched places, I think, in conjunction with All Access, because they have gone in a direction where it's like, okay, in All Access, the real behind the scenes, who are we going to portray? Who do we want to really portray as the sympathetic, characters? Well, the EVPs, the people who are EVP adjacent. So that's, Britt Baker, that is, obviously Adam Cole, it's obviously Kenny and the Bucks, etc. And so for that to happen, they really had to completely flip what they were like. Blackpool Combat Club, all of a sudden, sort of without, I mean, and I'm fine with this creatively, but sort of without really a buildup or an explanation, they're now like the top heels on the men's side.
Yep.
And then, of course, you had the sort of the long simmering flip with, Britt and Jamie Hayter becoming top faces, and then all the ex-WWE people becoming the exiles, and they're now the top heels. So it's just interesting how I think that is an example of that outside. I mean, yes, it's still a TV show, so it's not exactly the same, but that sort of non-kayfabe in principle stuff influencing what they decided to do creatively on the kayfabe show.
Oh, sure. 100% agree with you. I encourage everyone to watch All Access. You definitely have to appreciate it for what it is. Tom is right. It is scripted reality.
I love it.
Yeah, I love it too. As someone who is
one of my favorite things.
As someone who is keenly aware of what it is and what they're trying to do, I like it. It reinforces my appreciation for Sammy Guevara.
It does. Anti-Mello, actually.
I would love to know if our favorite heel and heels, Megan, who really has a strong bias to Sammy Guevara, has she seen his maturity at all in this? Tay Mello as a very, very supportive wife.
She's the most supportive wife I've ever seen.
She's a supportive wife.
Yes, and a God-fearing woman.
I think for any kind of fan you are, if you want to you're at all curious to see what kind of goes on behind that curtain, even in this sort of very carefully produced way, it's excellent. It's a great show.
And from my perspective, it is interesting as it's just another layer of kayfabe that is like, you know, it's like
it's total divas.
Yeah.
It's a better to me. It's a better total divas
Yeah.
to me. I will say everyone on that show is acting except for Eddie Kingston. Eddie Kingston,
Right. Right.
Eddie Kingston has no idea what the Eddie Kingston has no idea why the TV cameras are on, why they're following backstage, what speech he's gonna give, and I just loved this like really well curated, like almost like VH1 Love and Hip Hop type scene where Sammy goes to Eddie and like wants to like make sure we're good, like we're good, right, man? Like we're just working, and Eddie's like, get the fuck out of my face, basically, and he's like, we don't have to like each other, just go do a good job, shake hands at the end of the day, that's it. I see you, you see me. That's it. Like it was the greatest.
And when we're in the ring, I'm gonna hit you. Yeah.
But it was just the perfect Eddie. Like Eddie Kingston can do no wrong me in that sense. I still think he's a horrible wrestler. Besides that, I think he's phenomenal when it comes to this type of thing. I do think that it's really interesting for whatever reason. And to me, you're right. I think Sammy. If you have to pick one star of the show right now, and it's Sammy Guevara, right? But Tony has this thing with Adam Cole that I think if All Access is indie indication and indie indication of what Tony is like, letting Adam Cole do over the last couple of weeks, he's going to be the guy that beats MJF. Like he's going to be the guy that holds the belt as the biggest person in the company.
Could be.
And it's really interesting because I think if you put that, juxtaposition beside each other, where you have Roman Reigns and then you have Adam Cole as champions, I think WWE takes that all day. Like, I just think they do.
Yeah.
Like, there's something, love them or hate them, monologues, all that. There's something about MJF that is very much a Ric Flair to Hulk Hogan type thing.
Mm-hmm.
But if anybody else has that belt and you have Roman Reigns over there, I think you're in good shape if you're WWE. So I think it's an interesting thing.
MJF was tremendous on Wednesday,
showcasing
every bit of talent he has
so good
in so many ways. I thought it was excellent. Yeah. And quick shout out as we're heading off here.
Yep.
Our friend Victor Perry,
I thought we were going to get through a show without mentioning the wrestling.
No way.
We were this close. We were this close.
At Wallflower Perry, this guy had a great weekend. He took a handful of kids out to California for WrestleMania. He had a larger group with him last night at Dynamite. Had some great access with wrestlers, MJF, Kenny Omega, FTR. They all got some FaceTime with the wrestling club.
Jay Cargill.
Cargill.
Yeah,
big shout out to Victor. I giggle. I just tickle pig for him. Love it. Great for him.
Thought we were this close. We were this close to making it through.
We're never getting through a show without talking about
one of those days we will.
One final thought from me. This is going back to Raw. I have to say that as much as Raw was kind of a directionless and a little bit of a mess of a show, I actually really, really, other than the fact it was a bait and switch, which that's classic Vince, a bait and switch main event, but it didn't happen. I loved the closing segment.
Mm-hmm.
This is the Brock
destroying Cody.
This is the Brock that I love to see, and who also scares me because he's just like, this is not an act. He's just going to throw Cody around and, hey, Cody, good luck. I hope you don't get hurt. It's great for Cody. It gives him another main event level opponent, and also keeps like the Roman thing for down the road if they want to do that again. And this is the Brock that is like scares me, which I enjoy.
Yep.
Yeah, and I thought it was a great swerve. I thought that ending was a great swerve, and I was actually kind of happy about it because I was like, what's going to happen here?
Yeah.
And I did not want to see a Brock Roman type thing again.
Yeah.
But I thought it was great. There's a lot, guys. There's a lot this weekend. There are a lot of our friends of WCWF were there. Our buddy Mo from the No Words Bar podcast was there. my buddy Flobo, who's been on now on WCWF. It was there in LA. It's just a lot of opportunity, a lot of questions, a lot of uncertainty, especially if you're looking at the WWE side. But there's a lot of opportunity. I think, guys, that Wembley Stadium announcement for AEW is massive.
I'm going to be really interested to see what kind of crowd they can get.
Yeah, I was huge. And it was, and I love the fact that they were going back to their roots, like the first pay-per-views. They have the same title as the first pay-per-view they had before it was even AEW. It's just like this. So I'm excited about what's going to happen as we move forward.
Wembley Stadium is the right place to have Punk and Omega. I'm just going to say that right now.
Oh my gosh,
that's the place to have it.
We'll see.
The place to have it,
gentlemen. It is time. We're an hour 40 in. We're going to have to.
It's the bit. In fairness, it's probably the most eventful week of wrestling news, maybe ever.
Absolutely. Yeah. We're gonna have to call it out here, guys. Let's count it out. 1, 2, 3. Until next.